session. Okay. See, DataPower, as we know, is basically a dedicated hardware appliance which we can use it mainly for transformations and also for the security reasons. So transformations in the sense we can convert any message from one format to other format, like from XML to SOAP, REST to SOAP, SOAP to XML, vice versa. Any to any conversion is possible using DataPower. And also we can include or implement AAA, SSL, and also we can do an encryption, decryption, this message signature, all the security aspects using DataPower. Okay. And we here going to see something called DataPower XI52 appliance. We have different DataPower appliances available in the market. One of the most commonly and widely used appliance is XI52. Okay. Now, here I am using the VMware workstation to run the appliance locally in my system. See here, see this is the VMware workstation on which I am running my DataPower instance. And hence it will take my network IP address over here. Okay. And here in DataPower you have an administrator and also a developer. As an admin, you will be involved in creating the domains, providing the necessary user access, checking the performance of the appliance, doing the firmware upgradation. So all these tasks are performed by the admin. As a developer, you will be mainly working on creating the services and end-to-end development of a service like a web service proxy, a multi-protocol gateway, XML firewall, implementing the security, writing the XSLT. See, in DataPower, if you want to implement any logical thing, like for example, you want to transform a message from XML to SOAP, or you want to implement dynamic routing or a custom error handling, you need to write XSLTs for that. So XSLT writing is completely a developer task, and also this service creation. So we are going to see those service creations and also the XSLTs, and we are going to test the services by using SOAP UI or Postman, and also we are going to capture the logs and we see how to do the troubleshooting in DataPower. Okay. Now, so let's assume that we have a new DataPower appliance that has been given to us. So if you just see, this is the first login page, what you see in the DataPower. Here, 9090 is the standard port number for the GUI. Almost everywhere they use the 9090 as a dedicated port number for the web GUI for DataPower. Okay. So let's assume that we have installed a new DataPower appliance and hence we have only one domain which is called as a default domain. Okay. So we have a username, a password and a domain. So let's assume we are the admin. So we just log into the appliance.
I have one question here.
Yeah.
DataPower is running on which application server? The port number is 9090, is that right? How DataPower is running? I mean, how we can access this? Is there any specific application server is there?
No, it's basically, see, in real time it will be a physical appliance which will be there in the DMZ, and then you are going to have the Ethernet being configured for the appliance, so we can make a communication using those Ethernet IP address. Here what we do, here we have the virtual copy of the same DataPower appliance running locally in the system. Okay, you see here.
Okay.
So these are the Ethernet IP addresses that are being used by my DataPower from my system, from my network. So I can use any of these Ethernets to connect to my appliance. So we need to install this virtual appliance in the system locally and then run this over the VMware workstation so that you will have this DataPower's GUI in the browser. Okay.
Okay.
In order to install that, we would need a system with a minimum 4 to 6 GB of RAM with an i3 processor or above, which supports Intel virtualization. Okay. Minimum 4 to 6 GB of RAM with i3 processor or above. If you have that system configuration, yes, we can easily install this virtual appliance. See, what is the difference between a virtual and a physical? It's basically a software version of your actual appliance because DataPower is a dedicated XML based hardware appliance. Okay, it's like 1.7-inch thick rack mountable device, like a CPU kind of a size. Okay, so in the real time, we normally use the physical appliances which will be present in the DMZ, and we only use this web GUI to communicate with the DataPower appliance. Okay, so the GUI what you see here, it is same as what you do in your real-time projects as well. Okay, the only difference is here you have a local instance of the DataPower running in your virtual in the VMware workstation, but in real time you have actual physical appliance in the DMZ. That's the only difference. But apart from that, the functionality wise, the GUI, everything is the same. Okay, even in real time, what happens when you join any DataPower project, you will only be given with an URL which you can use to connect to the appliance. That's it. You don't see, you don't get a chance to actually see the physical appliance because it will be somewhere in the data center. Okay. Okay, perfect. Now, so once you log in to the appliance, the first page what you see is called as control panel. Okay. And on the top of the control panel, if you see on the left side, it shows which appliance you are using. We have XI52, XG45, XB62, IDG, the different appliances. Each of those appliances has their own specifications and functionalities, but almost all the basic concepts of DataPower remains the same in every appliance. Let's say today you started working on XI52 and tomorrow someone asks you to work on IDG, it's almost the same. Only few naming conventions and also the few new objects in each appliance. Apart from that, the basic configuration of all the services, testing, troubleshooting remains the same. Okay, it's a different flavors of appliances. We have it from the IBM. And you see, this is the DataPower XI52 appliance, and you have a simple search box here. Whenever you want to navigate through your DataPower objects, you can simply search them here. For example, just type it as SSL. It will give you the list of objects which contains SSL in it. So you can just open this and do the configuration. Okay. Since DataPower is a hardware appliance, you have something called a firmware. Okay. Firmware is basically an integrated software which keeps your DataPower appliance running. Like for example, I cannot say completely as an OS, but yes, your DataPower is dependent on this firmware. Like if I have an iPhone, I have an associated iOS, right? Like how I upgrade or update my iOS version from one to the latest one. Similarly, we can upgrade our DataPower's firmware version as well. IBM will be releasing the latest firmware versions, and we can download this firmware versions from the IBM Fix Central website and use it to upgrade our appliances. So the current version which we are using is 7.5. Okay, and you see there is a license agreement from IBM, followed by admin. This is basically the username with which you have logged in. Right? If I log in as, let's say, Praveen, then it will be Praveen@sandboxdev. So whatever the username with which you are logging in, so every user will have his own user account being created in DataPower. So when the user logs in, automatically that particular username will be taken into consideration and that will be displayed here. But since I'm the admin now here, it shows admin. @sandbox dev. Sandbox dev is a name given to my appliance. You can give any name to your appliance. It's just a system identifier. Okay. Followed by under which domain you are currently working on. That will be shown here. You see, domain is default. And save configuration. Any work that you do it in DataPower, if you want that to be saved, you should always hit on save config. Until unless you don't hit on the save configuration, whatever the work that you do will not be saved. A simple logout button, when you hit on that, it will take you back to the login page. And your control panel has been divided into three sections. One is services, monitoring and troubleshooting, files and administration. Okay. Here, in real time, we mainly work like 99%, we work on either web service proxy or multi-protocol gateway. Okay. These are the services that we use in DataPower to expose the backend services. It might be a SOAP service or it might be a RESTful service. If it is a SOAP, we go with web service proxy. If it is a REST, we always go with multi-protocol gateway. We will see that. Okay. Now, just to do some basic settings on the appliance. Like for example, you want to set the date and time for your appliance. That you can do it by going to the search option. See here, search for time settings. It is basically let you know under which time zone, on which time zone you want your appliance to run. So that it will take this particular time zone into consideration when it generates the logs. You see, you have all the time zones which you can use it. Okay. Once you set the time zone here, and then on the control panel, you see system control. Just hit on that. Inside the system control, you can see there is an option to set the correct date and time. See here, this is the date and time. Okay. And followed by the same system control, if you just scroll down, you see secure backup and a secure restore. It is basically nothing but if you want to take a backup of the existing configurations, you can do it from here. There are two ways to take a backup from DataPower appliance. Either you can make it as a secure, that is by protecting with a certificate, so that when you restore it back, you need a corresponding private key to do that. You see, when you want to restore it, you should have the corresponding credentials, that is your private key. Whereas if you don't want to use the secure backup way of taking the export, you can go to control panel and you see there is an option called export configuration. So you can export an individual object or a domain or a service or entire DataPower appliance. So you can take a copy of the configuration of the entire appliance and you can download it as a zip file. It will be an XML. As I said, DataPower is an XML based appliance. The output that it generates is basically an XML file. So you can see, create a backup of the entire system so that it downloads the entire configurations what you have it on the appliance. And then when you hit on the next, it will give you see the name of the exported file will be export. Hit on next and then it gives you a downloadable button. When you hit on that, automatically the configurations what you did, everything on the appliance will be downloaded as a zip file. So you can use this export configuration, and also you have something called import configuration. So that if I want to replicate the same configuration from one appliance to other appliance or from one domain to other domain, we can simply do an export and import configuration. Okay, so it saves a lot of work when you want to replicate the same kind of objects on different appliances or different domains. Okay, so you develop on one service, you develop on one domain, and then you take an export of it and then go to the other domain where you want to use it. Just import the configurations. Okay, and we will see that we will create some objects and then we export it from there and then we will import it as well. So just to give you a high level idea on what are the options that we have it in DataPower, so we'll go through this. Within the system control also, you have some options to change the password. The default admin password, if you want to change it, you can change it from here under the system control from the default domain. Also, you have some options called restart the domain, reset the domain. Let's say if you see that there is some issue with the performance of the appliance because of a lot of services running on, or a lot of people are working in the same domain. If you want to restart the appliance, you can just always do a restarted domain. So it will restart this domain so that it will remove all the unnecessary files, unnecessary locks, and automatically it frees up the space so that the performance can be increased. You can do a restart. You can also do a reset. A reset means it will erase all the contents of your domain. It will remove all the configurations that are there in the domain. So you have to be careful when you are doing restart, because unknowingly if you do a reset, it will erase all the contents. Okay. And now the question is, how do we do the development in real time? The first thing that you need to remember is we are not supposed to use the default domain for development purpose. The default domain is purely meant for administrative activities. Okay. So now, how are we going to do the development? That's the reason we create something called application domain. Application domain. What is an application domain? Application domain is basically nothing but you are creating an extra space out of your DataPower appliance, which you can use it as a dedicated for development. And on what basis I need to create an application domain? Yeah, that's purely an architectural decision. Like for example, you can have a domain based upon the service provider, based upon the functionality. It can be anything. It's just an additional space that you are using. Instead of using the default domain, you always create multiple application domains in DataPower appliance and use them for your development purpose. Like for example, let's say I have a service provider who wants to host around like 10 services through DataPower. So you can create a dedicated domain for him. So all his services will be under one domain. And let's say you have some services that you want to segregate based upon the functionality. So for a specific function, you can have one domain and you can have similar kind of services running in one domain. So it's purely on our needs, how you want to create an application domain. So in real time, what happens when you start working on DataPower in a project? So you will be notified to use the domain as per the need for the project. So they will let you know which domain you need to use for the development purpose. Okay. Now, let's say we assume that we are the admin here and we have only the default domain. So how are we going to create an application domain for the development purpose? Just search here as application domain. Okay. Just search for application domain. it will give you the list of domains which are running in my appliance as of now. So these are the domains. Ideally, if you take a new DataPower appliance, you will only see the default here. You will not see any other domains. Now, if you want to add a new domain, hit on add. We treat everything as an object in DataPower. Even a domain is also referred as an object. So just hit on add. Once you go inside the configuration page of the domain, you see the first thing is name. What should be the name of the application domain that you want to create? Let's say I'll give it as dp dev. Okay. Let's give it as dp dev. The best part of the DataPower's GUI is in every GUI page, you see there is a help link. If you don't understand what are these parameters that you need to configure here, what are the fields, you always hit on the help link. It will give you the list of like fields that you need to configure along with the app explanation. It gives you information about the configuration that you want to do. And once you give the name, next is administrative state. Always ensure that the administrative state is enabled. If you make it as a disabled, then this object will be down and it will not be useful for you. Okay, and followed by comments. You can add any user defined comments here. Say the domain. Let's say something the domain. Followed by visible application domains set to default. What is the need for us to set it to default? There are two main reasons. The first reason is remember that in DataPower, any configurations that you do it in one domain, you can only see it when you go to that particular domain. Like for example, if you see here, I have multiple domains. Whatever the configurations that I have it under iCraftDP domain, I cannot see it from let's say Shubha_DP domain. I have to go to the specific domain to see what are the files that you have uploaded, what are the configurations that you have done. Okay. Now we have something called file management in DataPower. Okay. If you see any domain, every domain will have a file management. It is basically a repository where you upload all your service related files like a WSDL, XSD, XML, XSLTs, public certificate, private keys. Everything will be uploaded in this file management. Now, as an admin, let's say for example, I have 50 domains in my appliance. And if I want to see what are the files that are present in every domain, what I need to do, I need to manually go to every domain and check the file management of every domain, correct? Instead of doing that hectic task, I can simply set this visible application domains to default so that the admin can see the files that are present in my application domain directly from the default domain itself without need for him to log in to every domain. So the visible application domain will help the admin to have the file management visible from the default domain itself. You see here, the file management of the default domain, under every directory, you will see the name of the domains. You see, iCraftDP, MagixDP, MindMagixDP, Shubha_DP. So whatever that you upload in the application domain, the same will be reflecting here. So every file, not only the certificates, even if you take the WSDLs, XSTs, everything, you see, these are the files that are present in my iCraft_DP domain. Similarly, under MagixDP, you have these files. So it helps the admin to check the file management of every domain from the default domain itself. That is the first reason. The second reason is we want certain default configuration supporting files to be inherited from the default domain to your newly created domain. You see here in the file management, there is a directory called store directory. Okay, this is something where you have all the configuration supporting files. When you install the DataPower appliance, all these configuration specific files are going to be made available in the appliance. When you install it automatically, these are going to be available. If you want this store directory also to be inherited to your newly created application domain, then you set it as default. Automatically, it inherits those files as well. Okay, so those are the two reasons why we set the visible application domains to default. Choose it as a default, set the file permissions, whether you want the files to be copied from, to copied to, or deleted in this domain. Also enable the auditing and logging. Okay, just do an apply first. Apply will create the object, but it will not save it. So once you have applied, then you need to do a save configuration. Only then your changes are going to be saved. Just apply it. You see, successfully created application domain. This configuration has been added and not yet saved. If you want to save the configuration, just do a save config here. Always, when you do any development or when you create any object, you can see the status of that object next to the object name. If it is up, that means the configuration what you did is correct. It has all the dependent objects that you are referring to, and also the status is up, it means it is running. If you see that as a down highlighted in red color, it means that there is some issue with this configuration. Okay. Now, just go back to the list of application domains. You should be able to see your newly created application domain over there. You see, dp_dev, the status is saved. OP state is nothing but operation state. It is up and running, and the dedicated logs for this domain, you can see it from here. Also now if you see from the drop down list, you will see dp_dev domain. It has created. And when we talk about the visible application domains, as I said, go to the file management of the default domain, just to refresh the page. It should have created a folder specific to my new domain. Okay, here under the third directory, you see dp_dev. As of now, I don't have any files in my application domain, hence it is empty. As soon as you upload something in your application domain, automatically that will be reflected here. Okay. Now, since we have the permission to switch from one domain to other domain, as we are the admin, I can easily switch from default domain, let's say, to dp_dev domain. So now I will be inside dp_dev domain. Here, let's check the file management first. You should be able to see the store directory inherited from the default domain to this domain. You see, you have the store directory. Now what I will do, I will go back to the default domain and I will remove that visible application domains from default so that you can see the difference. Let's go to the application domain. Here. So I will remove this, apply it. Save the configuration first and then switch from default domain to your application domain. Now switch to dp_dev domain and check the file management now. you will not be able to find the store directory. You see, there is no store directory. If you don't have a store directory, when you try to develop a web service proxy or any other services, it will not allow you to do that because it has all the configurations of putting files which has to be mandatorily present on the domain. Hence, we always set the visible application domains to default. Now I'll go back and make the changes. Yes, any questions? The domain creation?
Yeah, I have one quick question.
Yeah, there's yeah.
So, after creating a domain,
Mhm.
so can we rename the domain name, or we have to delete it
You
and
have to
recreate
delete
it again?
to recreate any one. In DataPower, not only the domain, any object that you create once, you cannot
Mhm.
rename it.
Okay, okay, okay,
Every object that you create, if you want to change the name, you have to delete the existing one or create a new one.
okay.
Okay. So I'll do an upload.
And I have one more question.
Yeah, Madhu, yeah.
Whenever you search the application,
Domain, there will be two.
yeah,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, that's a bug from the IBM itself.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
On that, and if you see, like configuration checkpoints, you see there are two configuration checkpoints. Yeah, that's basically a bug because both of them
Okay,
take you to the same page.
okay.
Yes. Any other
I
question?
have a question.
Mhm.
While creating the domain, what are permissions to give that particular domain?
Yeah, we give all the permissions usually because you want certain files to be uploaded, certain files to be deleted. So you should have at least the file management level permissions. So we set all the file permissions and also we enable the auditing and logging.
Okay.
So that you can upload the files, you can delete the files, you can move the files from one folder to the folder. You can do everything with the file management. So we set all the file permissions.
Then there is no difference between the default domain and other domains, right?
Now, you see now, if I go to my application domain, okay, which is dpdev, now search for application domain here. You see, you don't find this because anything with respect to your appliances based configuration that you want to change it, you can only do it from the default domain. You cannot create another application domain from an existing application domain. That can only be done from the default. Also, if you see the system control of your application domain, it will be very minimum. You don't see much options here. You see, you have an option to change the password. You can restart the domain. You can do a reset. You cannot take a secure backup from here. You cannot set the date and time for your appliance. You cannot do a firmware upgradation. You don't do anything here. Anything with respect to your appliance level configurations that you want to change, you can only do it from the default domain as an admin.
Okay.
Okay. So with respect to appliance administration, it is only possible from the default domain. That's the reason we use a default domain purely for administration. We use application domains purely for development purpose. Okay. So now this is a dedicated domain for us, which we can use it for the development purpose. Now the question is, let's say we have a new DataPower developer who has joined the team and I want to give the access to him so that he can log into this particular domain. I don't want to give the default admin access to every user. I have to create a restricted user to every domain. I can do it from the default domain by creating an user account. So every individual user can be created as a user account here in DataPower, so that we will have a specific username and a password that will be set for every user. So just search for user account here. Okay. Just hit on user account. That will give you the list of users who can access the domains. Okay. Let's say I want to add a new user who wants to access my new domain. So I will hit on add here. The first thing it asks is, what is the username with which you want the user to log in? Okay. Let's say, for example, I'll give it as Praveen. Okay. So this means Praveen will be the username. Earlier it was admin that we were using for the default domain. Now I will use Praveen for my application domain. Set a default password so that when you log in for the first time, it will ask you to change the default password. Okay. Set default password here. And access level. We have 3 different levels of access: user deprecated, privileged, and group defined. You can always go to the access level to understand what are those actually. See, user deprecated means it doesn't have much permissions. The user cannot do anything except the read access. Okay. Privileged means you have all the permissions for the domain. It's like more of an admin to that domain. Whereas a group defined means we maintain the access at the group level instead of user level. So normally in real time we prefer to go with the user groups, so that I can create a group. Let's say one has the DataPower developers, the other one is for the DataPower testers, or the maybe other one for the DataPower support. So I can add the individual users to that group so that all the members of the group will have the same level of access which is defined at the group level. So instead of maintaining the user access at the individual user level, it's always a good practice to maintain it at the group level, so that all the members of the group will have the same kind of permissions. So if you choose it as a group defined, you see it will ask you to create a new user group. If you choose it as, let's say, privileged, or if you choose it as user deprecated, you don't see that option. So let's use the group defined option. So you need to create a new user group. So just hit on plus. And user group is basically nothing but what kind of access that you want to give it to your group members. Let's say, for example, I'll give it as DP dev group. Okay. And by default, if you see, you have the read permission. This group members can access every domain with full read permission. I don't want to use the default one. I'll remove it. Hit on build so that you can build a new access profile by yourself. The local address. You can always use your DataPower's IP address. If you have an alias IP address, where we have usually in real time we maintain 2 different IP addresses. One is for the management and the other one is for the traffic. So you can use any of those IP addresses, or you can also use your DataPower's GUI address itself. Okay. And to which domain you want to give the permission. So this is the domain. And under this domain, whether you want the user to access all the objects or only a particular object. You see here, I can give permission to access only the SSL client profile within that domain. If you want to give the permission to access all the objects, you can choose it as all resources, and also you can choose what kind of privileges you want to give to the group members. Whether you want the users can have the read access, write access, add, delete, and execute. So you can set all the permissions or privileges for the group members. Just hit on save. See, now the user can access this IP address, and at this you can go to the DP dev domain and start all resources with full read, write, add, delete, and execute permissions. Similarly, if the user wants, if group members want to access another application domain, you can create one more statement like this. Let's say along with the dpdev, I can give it as a craft dp and hit on save. So now they can access both the domains. So it's up to the individual user or the admin to decide which domain that you want to be given permission. Okay, let's say I will keep it only dpdev here. Hit on apply. And if you want to put a more restriction on the user, wherein he has to be restricted only to a particular domain, you can restrict it over here by using this option. He cannot switch from one domain to other domain. He will be only the user to dpdev domain. He cannot log into any other application domain in my appliance. So I'm putting a restriction here. So just hit on apply here and save the configuration. Save configuration. Now what we will do, we will log out from the appliance and we'll try to log in as a developer. So Praveen is a username and the default password that was set. Let's try to log into default domain. You see, it gives you an error, authentication failure, because you don't have an account created for the default domain. So let's try to log into some other domain. Let's say magics_dp domain. Even then it fails because you don't have the permission. And let's try to the dedicated domain where we have the permissions. You see, login successful. For the first time, it asks you to change the password. So I'll change the password here. Now log in back with your new password that has been set. Now if you see, you are a dedicated user to this particular domain. You see, now the username is Praveen and you see here dpdev. You don't see a drop down list here because you don't have permission to log into any other domain, hence you don't see the drop down also. You are a restricted user within this domain. So normally in real time, the admin will create a user account like this and he will give you the permission to access application domains. Clear? Any questions so far? Domain creation?
Yeah, I have one quick question. So while creating the user group, so what option usually we select in resource type?
Sorry, resource type?
Yeah. So what option usually we will be selecting in for resource type while creating the user group?
Let me go back. So here again, inside the group within the access profile, you mean?
Right.
Yeah, it will be all resources. You mean okay, resource type? Yeah, because basically we want the user to access every object within the domain.
Okay.
So he should be given the permission to access all the objects within the domain so that he can do the development, he can do the testing, troubleshooting, everything within the domain. He cannot do anything on the appliance level. Yeah.
Okay, and also in the local address, right? So you have just given the IP, so there is no need of giving the port number 9090.
No, not required because by default it's 9090 for the GUI. it will automatically take this. You just need to give the IP address here.
Okay.
And also here, for example, search for a web management interface, web management service. Okay, just open this web management service in the default domain. You will see how it has been configured. You see 9090 is a dedicated port number that was assigned.
Okay.
Okay, so this we do it when we set up the initial appliance itself. During the initial setup of the DataPower appliance, it will ask us to set the default password, default port number. We can set it there itself. If you don't want to use 9090, yes, we can always change the port numbers. But ideally, yeah, we keep the default itself. Okay, and also you see this option called idle timeout. What happens in DataPower normally is for every 15 minutes, I think, no, not 15 minutes, it is less than that. The DataPower appliance will log off. Okay, when you don't do anything, automatically it times out. You see. Okay, so if you don't want that to happen, let's say you don't want the DataPower GUI to log off or to become inactive, you can set it as 0 seconds. If you do it as a 0, your GUI will never log off by itself until and unless you manually do a logout. Okay, so normally it times out and you need to log in back again and again. But here, if you keep it as a 0, yes, it will never log off by itself. You need to manually log out. So we have a web management service that it will be running. Using this configuration itself, you will be able to connect to the GUI.
So this ideal time,
Oh, go ahead. Go
sorry,
ahead.
okay. This ideal timeout cannot be set for the particular user, or it has to be set to
It's the
whole.
appliance level. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's for the whole appliance level, irrespective of any user. Every user will have the same effect.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, one more question. So after creating the domain,
Mhm.
so if at all we want to delete the domain, right?
Mhm.
So by logging into the domain, we can delete the domain, or we have to
Not
usually, yeah, we'll go to
default.
default domain and we
Yeah.
have to delete it,
Yes.
right? Okay.
So, like as I said, anything with respect to your appliances based configurations that you want to delete, you can only go to the default domain as an admin, go to the specific object, and inside that you will see an option to delete. So just hit on the delete button and then save the configuration. Automatically it will be deleted. Oh,
If the domain, I mean, if any user logs into the domain, so the domain will get delete or it will
no,
not get
it'll if it is referred by some other user.
delete?
See now. See, cannot be deleted in use by user Praveen. So first you need to delete the user account, and then you need to delete the domain.
Okay.
Yes. Any other questions?
Is it create the domain by CLI?
No, normally we don't use CLIs in real time. We never use CLIs because you have everything that can be done easily with the GUI. We don't use CLIs at all. Okay, but if you want to log into the CLI, yeah, I'll show you in the coming sessions how to log into the CLI mode and how you can execute the different commands over there. But it's a
And what are the activities to showing me?
sorry.
What are the what are the activities will perform in CLI side?
Normally,
Uh,
what happens is when you are doing a firmware upgradation, you will not be able to log into the GUI. Okay, so during that time, you can use the CLI mode to check the logs, to check whether your appliance is restarting or not. Only there, I see most of the admins use this. But apart from that, yeah, no one use this because every time they do it from the GUI itself.
okay.
Okay. So So I will share you a couple of files which you can download it and keep it ready maybe. So when you are free, you can let me know. We can connect maybe one to one, because so that we can complete the installation of the appliance as well. So that I can install this appliance locally in your systems, so that you will have your own set of appliance running, so that you can log in and you can do practice at any point of time when you need. Okay.
I have downloaded IDG, so is that fine, right?
Yeah, should be fine.
Like,
Yeah, as I said, any appliance, it should be fine.
okay,
There's a
okay,
full concept. If you see the domain creations, the web service proxy, multi-protocol gateways, and the logs, probe, system logs, troubleshooting, everything is the same. Only few minor changes or additions from one domain to other domain. From one appliance to other appliance.
okay. Then I'll go with IDG.
Sure, yeah, perfect. No worries. Yeah, yeah. Yes, Shrikant, any questions? Tarak, yes.
No questions so far.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, and I think like you all were working on DataPower, or like you have started now.
Currently working,
Okay,
part of our work. Yeah.
okay, perfect. Yeah, okay,
I'm completely new to this DataPower.
okay, perfect. Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's the reason I just started from the domain creation, because I mainly concentrate on the development side, where, like for example, yeah, you see here, where we see initially like the domain creations and the user accounts, and then we start with the certificates, the private keys, public certificates, the front end handlers, what is a WSDL XSD, and also we see the end-to-end service configuration like a web service proxy, multi-protocol gateway, XML firewall in a loopback mode, testing and troubleshooting, and also the XSLT part here. So here we will discuss in XSLT how to write an XSLT file, like to do an XML to SOAP, REST to SOAP, dynamic routing, error handling using XSLT. We also learn the basic XSLT syntaxes, like what is a template, how to use a if condition, a for each condition, a when condition, what is an XPath expression, what is an XSL value of select. So we see everything in XSLT session. And also we write these XSLTs, we put it on the DataPower appliance, we test it, the transformations as well. And also we have something called extension functions, DataPower extension functions, how to incorporate these functions using XSLT. Yeah, we'll also see that.
And one more question. Like I said, I'm currently working, but it's still new for me. So what would be the prerequisite for the data power usually?
Yeah, XML.
Okay.
So if you are no XML web services, SOAP, RESTful, yeah, that's more than sufficient.
Okay.
Because XSLT, yeah, I'll be covering it up. But if you understand the basic XMLs, what is an XML namespace, what is a WSDL, what is an XSD, SOAP, what is the difference between a SOAP and a REST services, different HTTP methods in a REST, like HTTP GET, HTTP POST, PUT, delete, patch, update.
Okay.
You know those? Yeah, that should be sufficient.
Okay.
Perfect. Then. So I'll share you the today's recording. I'll upload it to the drive and I'll share it to you so that you can go through it once again and you can practice it. And if you have any questions, always please feel free to ask me. Maybe you can note it down when you're practicing it, and you can ask me in the tomorrow session, or you can also ping me in the WhatsApp, or you can send me an email so that we can discuss when you have questions. Okay.
Okay.
Perfect. I'm just going to ping my phone number here. You can just save it if you need, so that if you want to contact, you can always contact me on this number. It's only on WhatsApp. Yeah, I'm available on WhatsApp. Okay. Perfect then. So let's catch up tomorrow at the same time, 9 p.m. EST. That's 6:30 a.m. IST. Yeah. So we will continue with the file management, and also we will see how to use a certificate and keys in DataPower. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
See you tomorrow. Bye.